All right, so you watched the game last night. Notre Dame, dignified, fighting to the end, but Ohio State, clearly the better team. And, you know, I was thinking about this. I've been talking about this the last couple of weeks with my buddy John Middlecoff, who's on my podcast. And college football not only has a new champion in Ohio State, and they were absolutely the best version of Ohio State I've seen in a long time, but college football also has a new king, and it's called the Big Ten. Michigan, Ohio State, Penn State, Oregon, USC are wealthy, well-heeled programs. And the Big Ten is in the footprint of L.A., New York, and Chicago, our three biggest cities, and Philadelphia. Philadelphia is full of Penn State grads. The SEC is big in Atlanta, but the game has changed now. The game now in college football is all about NIL and collectives. Alabama, their athletic director, came out 3 weeks ago. Nick Saban saw this coming years ago. He got out of there. Saban's a smart guy. He got out of there. He saw the Texas money. He saw the Michigan money. Brian Kelly lost a 5-star quarterback recruit to Northern Michigan. And Brian Kelly said, I'll give some of my salary. You don't have to do that at Penn State, Ohio State, USC, Oregon with Phil Knight money. This is not just a one-off. Michigan won last year. Ohio State won this year. And I'd put big money that Ohio State's going to repeat next year. Texas will be good, but Texas wasn't even part of the SEC a year ago. Remember all the SEC fans? Oh, Texas. They are now your life preserver in the NIL. They got big boy money. Texas may, in fact, have more than anybody except Phil Knight in Oregon. And so this year, it changed. We have a new king of college football, and it's the Big Ten. They were 5-1 against the SEC this year. Notre Dame is not part of the SEC, but they were clearly better. I watched when they played Georgia. So you start looking around, college football has never looked and felt more like the NFL. And we know what the NFL is about, billionaires. And the money historically in the South stays in the South. SEC grads, they may go to New York, but a lot of them stay in the South. Big Ten grads from these enormous schools. Ohio State has 66,000 students. They leave. They go to the West Coast, San Francisco, L.A. They go to the East Coast, D.C., Boston, New York. And then they come back, and they got money, and they spend it on the teams they love. I mean, you go look at Michigan State, a have-not in the Big Ten. Their two biggest boosters, one owns the Phoenix Suns, one owns the Cleveland Cavaliers. So I think it's changed. I think the SEC looks a little more boutique, and the Big Ten now feels a little more bougie. I think the SEC has gone from intimidating to kind of charming. There is a new king in college football, and it's not going away. Michigan last year, Ohio State this year, massive universities with massive enrollments. Students flee to the coasts for high-paying jobs. And then they come back and give to their schools. And this is not to say that the SEC doesn't have talent and doesn't have good coaches and doesn't have that parochial, tribal passion that all of us love. But it's different now. The biggest challenges for Ohio State this year were Penn State, Oregon, and Michigan. They steamrolled Tennessee. Steamrolled them. And Texas, the big dog now in the SEC, they didn't look as good as Ohio State. And Ohio State's two best players are coming back, and they will be the two best players, in my opinion. Jeremiah Smith and Caleb Downs will be the two best players easily in college football next year. And I talked to an NFL GM this week. He said if those guys were eligible for the draft today, and one's a freshman, Jeremiah Smith, he goes, they may go 1-2. This is not just about Ohio State. The Big Ten officially is the big dog in college football. Hey, the SEC, it was a nice run. I mean, you still go beat up on the Mountain West of the Big 12. Okay, I was just being obnoxious there. I admit I was being a little obnoxious. And the SEC is still great. I'm not saying that. But the last 2 years, you've watched the same games I've watched. Ohio State has better players. Michigan last year had better players. Penn State now, they lose a defensive end and a tight end. They're bringing almost everybody back, including a guy that will be a quarterback that gets drafted high next year. Washington in a rebuild. USC in a rebuild. Michigan. Not going to look like Michigan this year. Much better. It's all changed. It's a collective. It's the NIL. It's more like the NFL. Here's Ryan Day after the big win.
I just can't say enough about our guys and what they've overcome to get to this point, and they now have something to show for it. The number one goal is to win. That's where it started for on offense, defense, and special teams. Find a way to win the game, and that's what we did here in the playoffs. And now the stories of these guys will be told because they've cemented themselves in Ohio State history.
And you know what I love? Once you come to terms with sports isn't perfect. What I love about college football this year is that Ohio State was allowed to make mistakes, just like the NFL, was allowed to lose a late season home game, is that not everybody grows at the same speed. This Ohio State team had to get punched in the forehead by Michigan at home to really galvanize the locker room and become a force that looked like they were somewhere between college and pro. I mean, Notre Dame is a really good defense, and there were times they felt helpless last night. So, listen, everybody has their run. LeBron used to dominate the NBA. So did Michael. So did the SEC. This idea, though, hey, this is just a blip on the radar. No, it's not. No, it is not. So here's my take is there were two coaches I thought needed to be considered in Chicago. Mike McCarthy, who's had no owner and a meddling owner. I thought he was uniquely qualified for it. Or Ben Johnson. Is he going to be Sean McVay or Matt LaFleur? Or is he going to be Adam Gase and Brandon Staley? I don't know. Like young quarterbacks, a lot of it is, where do you land? Jaden Daniels got a really good OC and a veteran coach. Caleb Williams got the Bears. It is I'm going to tell you, it's a gravel road in Chicago full of potholes. Throw in some politics. And I thought Vrabel and Mike McCarthy were qualified for it. They have dealt with that nonsense before. They've gone off-road before. Ben Johnson, well, he knows offense. He's not taking that Lions O-line with him or that incredible Lions running back room with him or the great culture builder Dan Campbell with him. Chicago is going to be tough to navigate. Matt Nagy got to the playoffs twice with Mitch Trubisky, and they ran him out of town. It's a noisy city. They run managers out of town. They go after players. It's Boston. It's Philly. It's Chicago. Maybe they're Midwest nice, but they're noisy. Now, there's two real positives here. Number one is Caleb Williams wanted an offensive coach, and I think generationally, age-wise, Caleb Williams was saying, without saying it out loud, I kind of like this Ben Johnson guy. Here's Caleb Williams a week ago.
Selfishly, I want an offensive-minded guy so I can build with him and be with that coach for the next 19, 17, 15 years.
Yeah, so there you go. Ben Johnson is smart. He's clever. He takes risks. He just watched an organization get built up, and smart people by proximity. He looked around and, okay, I'm going to steal some of the things Dan Campbell did. So Caleb got an offensive guy, and the other thing to think about is you definitely weakened Detroit. Is that Dan Campbell's not known as a scheme guru or a scheme wizard. He's a walk-around guy. He's a culture creator. And Ben Johnson was the scheme to that stacked offensive building. Now, Detroit, because the O-line, Goff, and the running backs, they're going to score. It's going to be a good offense for years. Like Philadelphia, there's just too many good players, too good of an offensive line. Even Sirianni can't screw it up. But in the end, they won't be as clever or creative, and Ben Johnson's the reason for that. So the question becomes, is he going to be Brandon Staley? Is it going to be Adam Gase? He's got a little bit of a quirky personality. He doesn't feel like he's got that culture thing, that gravitas of McVay. But when Matt LaFleur got to Green Bay, he was kind of quiet, kind of reticent, wasn't a big, big alpha guy, and he's developed. I think Matt LaFleur's developed into a great coach. So I don't know exactly what you get. I always root for great athletes to find their Svengali, their guru, their wizard. Chicago, I'm not only hoping it happens, I think we could all say a little prayer that it happens. This is an organization that cannot get quarterback right. No, I mean, can't get it right at all. They've never had a quarterback throw for over 30 touchdowns. And even if Ben Johnson works, even if he works, because Matt Nagy, by and large, worked. He left with a winning record. Even if he works, will he be as good as Matt LaFleur, a top 5 coach? Will he be as creative as Kevin O'Connell in Minnesota? Will he be able to build a culture like Dan Campbell? Even if he's successful and Matt Nagy had a winning record, this division, the brain power, the cultures in this division are something else. So I'm hoping it works. All these young quarterbacks, where you land matters. And this is a gravel road with politics and potholes. It can work. I'm just not sure if it will.